At the end of Willow Street stood a house nobody talked about loudly. Not because it was haunted, not because it was dangerous, but because nobody knew what to say about it. The house looked ordinary, small garden, white walls, a wooden porch, and a bright blue front door, a blue so vivid it seemed almost out of place, like it belonged to another story, another life. For nearly 40 years, the same man lived there alone. His name was Arthur Bennett, and nobody ever entered his house. The mail stayed on the porch until evening. Groceries appeared and disappeared. Lights turned on at night, turned off before dawn. Life clearly existed inside, but nobody saw it. Not really. Children dared each other to knock on the door. Teenagers invented ghost stories. Neighbors whispered theories over backyard fences. Some said Arthur had once been a famous musician. Others claimed he had hidden millions somewhere inside. A few believed he was simply strange. Arthur never corrected anyone. He simply smiled politely and kept walking. Because some people stop explaining themselves when they realize nobody is listening. Every morning at exactly 8 o'clock, Arthur walked through town. Same route, same pace, same old brown coat. He would stop at the bakery, buy a loaf of bread, then continue toward the small park near the river. There he sat on the same bench for exactly 1 hour, never more, never less. Then he returned home. Every day, rain, snow, heat, wind, it didn't matter. The routine never changed. People noticed. People always noticed repetition, but nobody ever asked why. And Arthur never volunteered an answer. Then one autumn morning, the routine ended. The bakery owner waited. No Arthur. The park bench stayed empty. The curtains in the blue house remained closed. By evening, concern began replacing curiosity. The next morning, someone called the authorities. What happened afterwards spread through town within hours. Arthur Bennett had died peacefully in his sleep. He was 83 years old and completely alone, or so everyone thought. The funeral was small, very small. A handful of neighbors attended, mostly out of respect, partly out of curiosity. There were no children, no brothers, no sisters, no visitors from distant cities, no family, just silence and unanswered questions. After the service, the town slowly returned to normal, except for one thing, the blue house. It remained quiet, waiting, because someone eventually had to enter. Someone had to sort through Arthur's belongings. Someone had to decide what became of the house. 3 days later, a locksmith arrived, a town clerk, and a young real estate agent named Claire. Claire had never spoken to Arthur, but she volunteered to help, mostly because she was curious. The entire town was curious. For 40 years, nobody had crossed that doorway. Now, finally, the mystery would end. The blue door opened, slowly. The hinges creaked. Dust floated through sunlight, and everyone expected something strange, something shocking, something dramatic. Instead, they found something heartbreaking. The house was spotless, perfectly clean, every book arranged, every chair positioned carefully, every surface polished. It looked less like a home and more like a place waiting for someone. Claire noticed it first. There were 2 cups beside the kitchen sink. Not one, 2. 2 chairs at the dining table, 2 toothbrushes in the bathroom, 2 coats hanging beside the door. Everything arranged for 2 people. Even though Arthur had lived alone for decades, a strange silence filled the house. Then Claire entered the living room and stopped breathing. An entire wall was covered with photographs, hundreds of them, maybe thousands. Every photo showed the same woman, laughing, reading, gardening, holding flowers, sitting beside Arthur, dancing with Arthur, growing older beside Arthur. The room wasn't a mystery room. It was a love story, a lifetime displayed frame by frame. Below the photograph sat a small brass plaque, just 4 words, for Eleanor, always. Claire felt tears forming immediately because suddenly the house made sense. The second toothbrush, the second chair, the second cup. Arthur hadn't been living alone, not in his heart. The town clerk discovered a collection of journals, dozens of them, one for every year, each written by Arthur, each addressed to Eleanor. Claire opened the first one. The entry began, "My dearest Eleanor, today marks 1 week since you left. I know you're gone, but I don't know how to stop talking to you." The room became silent, the kind of silence people feel in their chest. Claire kept reading, year after year, page after page. Arthur had continued writing letters to his wife long after her death. Not because he believed she would answer, but because he couldn't imagine a day without speaking to her. Then they discovered the truth nobody in town had ever known. 41 years earlier, Arthur and Eleanor had been married for 20 years. They had no children, but they had each other, and for them, that had always been enough. Then Eleanor became sick, very sick. The illness arrived suddenly and stayed for nearly 3 years. Arthur became her caretaker, her nurse, her cook, her chauffeur, her everything. People offered help. Arthur thanked them, then declined, because every remaining moment mattered. Every conversation, every smile, every minute, he wanted all of it. According to the journals, their final conversation happened in the hospital. Eleanor knew she was dying. Arthur knew too. Neither wanted to say it aloud. Then Eleanor smiled weakly and asked one final favor. "Promise me something." Arthur promised before hearing the request. She laughed, then said, "Keep living." A pause. Then she added, "And paint the front door blue." Arthur looked confused. Even then, even lying in a hospital bed, Eleanor laughed, "The brightest blue you can find." "Why?" She smiled, "So when people pass by, they'll know happiness once lived here." 3 days later, she died. Arthur kept both promises. At least he tried. He painted the door blue, brighter than anyone expected, brighter than the neighborhood liked, brighter than common sense, because Eleanor had asked, and Arthur never ignored her requests. But living? That part was harder, much harder. Years passed, then decades. Arthur never remarried, never moved away, never changed the house. Every morning he prepared 2 cups of coffee, one for himself, one for Eleanor. Every evening he spoke to her photographs. Every anniversary he bought her favorite flowers. And every day he sat on the bench beside the river, because that had been their bench. The place where they met, the place where he proposed, the place where they spent countless afternoons talking about dreams neither of them would fully remember. Claire couldn't stop reading. Near the end of the final journal, she found one last entry, written only 2 weeks before Arthur died. His handwriting shook slightly, but the words remained clear. "My dearest Eleanor, I think I'm finally getting close. Not to an ending. To you. The blue paint is fading. The roses need trimming, and the house feels quieter these days. But I kept my promise. I stayed. I lived as best I could. And every day I loved you exactly as much as the day before. If there is another side to all of this, save me a seat on our bench." Claire wiped away tears, then looked around the room. Nobody spoke. Nobody needed to, because every rumor, every theory, every whisper had been wrong. Arthur wasn't hiding a dark secret. He wasn't strange. He wasn't unfriendly. He wasn't mysterious. He was simply a man who had spent 40 years honoring a love that never left him. A week later, the town gathered again, this time not for a funeral, but for something else. The mayor proposed preserving the blue door, just the door, as a memorial. People agreed immediately, because now everyone understood. The door had never been about mystery. It had been about memory. Years later, new families would move into the house. Children would play in the garden. Neighbors would tell stories. But the blue door remained, freshly painted, protected, loved. And whenever someone asked why the door was blue, someone always answered, because happiness lived there. And somewhere beyond sight, a man finally reached a bench beside a river. A woman was waiting, smiling, as if no time had passed at all.